evening, everybody. Welcome to our lecture this evening. We are going to be talking about our 5 most important recommendations to identify your intent. I'm Michael Kelly.
I'm Ella Herrera.
I'm Matt Newell.
I'm Haley Kiesler.
And I'm Patrick Kavanaugh.
And I want to talk to you about our purpose just to start off. Right? So first of all, in honor of Black History Month, our theme in this presentation is Dr. Martin Luther King, who I think we can all agree, with a show of hands, he lived a life of intent. Would you agree, everyone? Now keep your hands raised if you don't know who Dr. Martin Luther King is. It's a really easy way to get everyone to put their hands down. All right, now there are 2 types of intent, right? How many of you know with very clear difference of what a vision statement and a mission statement is, since we're all in JSON? It's kind of confusing, isn't it? Right?
Right.
Okay. So a vision statement, right, is the overarching theme of what you're working towards, right? Think of Martin Luther King had a dream, right? The mission statement is what you are currently doing to achieve that vision. Think of desegregating schools, right? So that's the difference between a vision and a mission statement, right? Now, we are going to start with why. That's our first recommendation. Right? I'm going to be talking about that this evening. Our second recommendation, which Ella will be talking about, is deciding how. Right? Then after that, Matt will talk about identifying our starting point. Right? Then Haley will help us create a plan. Right? And then Patrick will then unify the message and intent. Okay? So, before we play our video, I'd like to introduce Simon Sinek. Right? For those of you who don't know who he is, he's a marketing genius and a best-selling author. Right? He wrote the book called Start With Why. And the theory, real fast, is he calls a golden circle, right? With why in the middle, okay? How, and then what. And his theory is most people tell you what they do, some of them know how they do it, and very few know why they do it. But the best start with why in the way that they communicate. This video is a clip from a TED Talk that he did on his book Start With Why, and he's also going to use Martin Luther King Jr. as an example.
People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time, to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. We followed not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
So as you saw, Dr. King started with why. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Our first recommendation is to start with why. Now, this is the first type of intent, as we discussed earlier. Right? My own personal why is to give others what they need to be the best version of themselves. Now, how many of you have a version of yourself somewhere that likes to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos? Right? Now, let me ask you a question. If all of us, if everyone had the same type of purpose, the same type of intent that Dr. King had, what do you think that we'd be able to accomplish?
Greatness.
Greatness. Or conversely, what would the world look like today if Dr. King didn't? The first part of starting with why is why do we even start with why, right? Determine what you want and to determine what you need. Again, we're talking about a vision statement, right? The second piece is to determine what your audience wants and what your audience needs. The last piece is to create your own general purpose. Now, we want to look at how do we start with why. Dr. K actually gave a lecture on this the second week of class. Right? The first thing that you do is you think about your experiences. Right? And think about how those experiences bleed into what you believe, how those beliefs shape your view of the world, and you want to organize your thoughts around that. The reason why this is really important is because it gives you a prism to view the world, so that even when you're reacting off the cuff, you react on point. You react on brand, as we heard from Team 1. Right? You don't have to sit there and think about it, because you already know exactly what you believe. You defined it by organizing your thoughts around it. So I'm going to give an example from Dr. King himself. He was quoted saying, "I question and soul search constantly into myself to be as certain as I can that I am fulfilling the true meaning of my work, that I am maintaining my sense of purpose, and that I'm holding fast to my ideals, that I am guiding my people in the right direction." His why was driving his intent. It wasn't a one-time thing, it was an ongoing occurrence. And he said that he soul-searched constantly, not just when hitting bumps in the road. And then we have to be honest with ourselves and with those around us. Honest criticism, honest feedback, so that we can all improve, get aligned, and then make something powerful happen. The next piece I want to talk about are some tips for your presentation. The first tip is decide as a group what you're all passionate about. Based on each of your individual experiences and beliefs, right? That makes it easier to have passion in the middle of a presentation about a subject that maybe we all know a lot about already, right? Or maybe you think you know a lot about it, but the passion allows you to explore even further and learn something that you didn't think you would. Then you decide on a theme based on those collectively shared passions. Work together to connect that theme with the content that you're teaching, and then provide honest feedback to each other ongoing and consistently as you work on your presentation to ensure that everything you do is along that theme. Now, I'd like to welcome Ella Herrera. She's going to tell you how to decide how to embed your intent.
Thank you, Michael. Decide how. Sounds simple enough. So, good evening. We're going to be going how we're going to be accomplishing this. I'm going to give you action plan to start on your intent. The visionary activist, Dr. King, connected with emotionally charged speech. I have a dream, and he laid out how nonviolence would be their method of action. Determine the role your general purpose will play. The answer to our why, also known as our presentation objectives or goals, will consistently assist in determining our path to how. However, if your intent is unclear, then your how will not make sense. Controlling the framework will contribute to controlling the audience involvement, the amount of time given to our audience for feedback or questions. However, this can be limited. Thus, time constraint could potentially be an issue. So while fine-tuning your presentation, making changes to how you intend to accomplish your set goals, always refer back to your why. Ask yourself, like in life, we have to specify what we want from our audience. In this case, we want to have as much control as possible with what the audience thinks, feels, and does with this presentation. This process can be time-consuming, but well worth the effort in some cases. Whether it's measurable or attainable, giving the audience the correct guidelines to get the end result is up to the presenter. How much of an impact will your why need for it to be actionable? In reflecting on Dr. King's intended how, I find myself reflecting inward, where I hold dearly to a Spanish saying, soy manso, no menso. Translated, I am meek, not weak. Credence had never been given to the statement before, to such a simple phrase. How will your intent impact your life? Will it be measurable? This very presentation could be seen as a tell situation. However, because we want you to take action from your own why, this is a sell situation. On the iconic I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he shared the intended action, the how, quoted from his speech using the King Institute archive from Stanford University. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and violence. A consistent why will clarify the how your intent will be accomplished. Can you say the same thing a million different ways? That's what our intent should be. Change your tactics as often as necessary to get the intended result, but always remember the why you're doing it. Be realistic on your strengths and shortcomings. Getting assistance to accomplish your goal is sometimes just a matter of asking for help. Tips for your presentation. So to clarify, simply, streamline, fine-tune, all of the above, your intent. What type of audience involvement is required? Is it just informational? If it is, what kind of presentation would that be? Anybody? No? If it's just informational, it would be a tell situation. If the presentation is a presentation going for action, maybe you have a few questions involved, then that would be a sell situation. So for the last two, can I have a show of hands? Has anybody, are there any control freaks in here? Yeah. How about time management experts? Yeah. And detail-oriented aficionados? Definitely. I have personally found these last two to be a bit overwhelming, but have facilitated the end result. In the consult presentation, insight is required from the audience. So you have to give up a lot of control on this one, and even more so on the joint presentation. Guidance is requested from the audience. Does anybody have experience with these last two? No? Presenting and having, yeah, they're very cumbersome, but it's well worth the reward from getting that information. So as the textbook reiterates on presentation objectives, remember the way you succeed is by getting a good presentation objective and then meeting it. Thank you for your time, guys. I do appreciate it. And now we're going to have an activity. Okay? So the activity is going to be on the identifying your intent. But this is going to be specified to your own objective as to what it is that you're actually going towards. So what is your intent on your own chapter? We're going to have a 5-minute timer on this just to get, you know, the wheels going as far as the identifying your intent. So you should have that in front of you. Does anybody not have that? It's a little wheels. Exactly. Okay, so does anybody have any questions
It's
on your?
this worksheet if you have any questions.
Perfect, yeah. Does anybody have any questions on that worksheet? No? Thank you. And do you have any questions, please ask. It's just to go ahead and get us started on this.
No, this is as a team for your presentation. All this is applying to what you are doing.
So when you're thinking of your presentation, it's not our intent.
Oh, not our subject.
What is presented. Can you tell them this?
Yeah, no worries.
How you present this speech. That should help us. Does this work?
Yeah.
You have 3 minutes if you'd like to continue.
One more minute.
We need to coordinate with your audience, but not until yeah, it's not doing it, right?
Well, I mean, that's like the style, right? What's the why? If it works with like
It's the most effective, it's the, yeah, that,
Goal, did that match our
Okay, about 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you very much for your participation. Do appreciate it. And does anybody have anything that they want to share on their intent? Did this give you any type of additional steps to refocus your intent on? So we're all good?
well, I don't have questions, but it definitely did help us question like what we were gonna do and if our intent matched our goal, and if it was. I mean, those are things I just haven't really thought about yet, and it did help us to make our presentation better. But I'm not telling because it'll be next week.
Very good. Thank you very much. You're welcome. And if anybody has any other questions, just feel free to hold on to them. We'll have more questions and answers at the end of the presentation. Thank you. And now we're going to have Matt Duell continue on.
So I'm going to be talking to you about identifying a starting point. As with anything, you always have to start somewhere. And so why is it important to identify a starting point? Because identifying a starting point can help you prepare for your audience. And with this preparation, you can adjust your language or maybe even the amount of depth you go into with a certain topic. Maybe the most important reason to identify a starting point is it can help you determine your presentation's objective. Obviously, you want a goal to set before you start working towards it, and you can kind of work backwards a little bit. And before you do anything else, you want to know what your overall goal is, and then you go from there. So finally, identifying a starting point can help you consider if your target is measurable. You don't want to set yourself up for failure, and this kind of relates to the second point of intent that Michael mentioned earlier on setting a measurable, quantifiable goal. If you set your presentation up with like an impossible or unrealistic goal, and then you spend a bunch of time working on your presentation, preparing it, all you're going to end up doing is just frustrating yourself because you're going to feel like you didn't succeed, or you're just going to realize that it's just not going to work. So an example I could think of is, say if I'm the president of some club on campus, and I come to this class to try to convince you guys to join professional finance, all those, whatever, the financial workers of America, whatever. If I'm coming in here and setting my example as, I'm going to get every single one of you guys to join, I'm just going to end up disappointing myself because I'm probably going to have one person asleep, one person's setting their fantasy football lineup, another person's hungover and asleep and setting their fantasy football lineup. So how can you work on those things? So researching your audience, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to research and be aware of the type of audience you have for your presentation. You want to have at least a rough understanding of their level of knowledge on a topic before you start speaking. This way you can adjust your presentation accordingly. If I'm giving a presentation about finance in a college class, I would want to know ahead of time if it's a class where it's really mixed with majors, or if I'm speaking to a class that's predominantly finance majors. So that way you're not going up there and using a bunch of terminology that maybe someone who's a marketing manager or a marketing major has no clue what you're talking about. We've all been in those presentations and those business basics classes where it's all mixed, and then you have a guest speaker each week. He's an IT major, and he goes up for 45 minutes, and then he goes, how many of you guys are IT majors? And 2 people raise their hand. If I was a speaker, I would kind of feel like I maybe was wasting my time, or maybe should have reconsidered some of the stuff I said. So also specifying what you want. You want to know exactly what your goal is before you start your presentation. And this obviously depends on the type of presentation you're giving, relating back to the tell or sell. So you want to base your presentation on exactly what it is that you want to achieve. So deciding on your focus. When you decide the type of presentation you want to give, you can also set your focus for the presentation. So if you're speaking in a sell presentation type, your focus is more on trying to tell people why something needs to be done and hopefully convincing them or inspiring them to make a change. As opposed to if you're speaking in a tell situation, obviously your main focus is on having what you're said remembered. So relating to Martin Luther King, he understood that in order to be successful, he had to appeal to all audiences and not just African Americans. So for setting realistic milestones, he knew that it obviously wasn't possible to change the mind of every single American, and that he couldn't completely erase the ideas of hatred and prejudice that many people had. His goal was he just wanted a world where people of all races could exist and coexist in peace. And keeping the end goal in mind, like I said, he set his focus on peace and coexistence. So one of the big reasons he believed in nonviolence was because he thought violence would be detrimental to his overall goal of peace and could maybe even just spread more differences and more violence and differences between races of people. And remembering the audience, always remembering the audience. Martin Luther King knew he had to do more than just appeal to African Americans, so he had to motivate and inspire people of all colors, backgrounds, and of course ideas in order to be successful. So for your presentation, there are different types of targets you can set for your presentation. That's what the think, feel, and do. And then the subheadings are going to be more of focuses within those targets. So within thinking, you can see that you can focus on knowledge, which is just, informing your audience on a certain topic, or you can focus on opinions, which is more of just sharing your personal opinion with your audience. Within feel, you can focus on attitudes, or you're trying to change someone's mind on something. This would be like your sell presentations. Or you can focus on emotions, which is like relating to the sell, trying to change their emotion or their feeling on something. And then finally, within do, you can focus on mental activities, which would be things like clarifying information. So for example, if your company brings out some new software, you might have a meeting where they break down just how to use the new software, everyone's on the same page. Or you can have physical actions. This is more things like praising your audience, the great hoorah speeches you get from bosses from, oh, we had a great quarter, stuff like that. So now I'm going to hand off to Haley, who is going to discuss creating a plan.
Thanks, Matt. So after you identify your starting point, you then need to create a plan after that starting point. So creating a plan is crucial to success. And if you don't have a plan, your presentation can kind of go awry and not make sense to the audience. So first, why? There we go. Okay, so why? First, you need to organize the team around the objectives. So this means that the team can focus on the overall goal of the presentation, and that throughout the entire presentation, the overall goal is being shown and the intent is throughout the presentation. Next, we need to make sure that everyone understands their part. So when you have an overall goal, an objective, a plan, you can identify team members that are maybe struggling and they're not meeting the intent within their parts or sections of their presentation. And then third, it provides a framework to operate. So kind of similar, it helps you stay on track when you're preparing resources or references. It helps you stick to a plan and stick to your intent. I'm left-handed. Okay, so how? So first you need to build the outline. So you need to have your goals, your intent, and what's needed in the presentation. So the requirements on the rubric, all of that needs to be laid out before you create your plan, and that's all goes into your outline. Next, you need to decide and generate agreement within the team. If the team does not all agree on a cohesive intent and organization of your PowerPoint, it's going to, again, be confusing to your audience, and your intent is not going to come across as clearly as you would like it to. Lastly, you need to choose attainable targets. Matt kind of touched on this earlier. If you have too high of expectations, then you're probably going to be focused too heavily on something that's unreachable and unattainable, and then the rest of your presentation is lacking. So then, who here has heard of the I Have a Dream speech? Okay, so put your hands down. Who knew that he changed his speech halfway through? Okay, so according to PBS, Martin Luther King, Michael's a great speaker. Martin Luther King, he had a written speech, and he was reading it to the audience, and he gauged his audience, and he realized that they weren't as interested or intrigued as his goal was, I guess. So he decided to change on the flip of a dime, and that's where the most memorable part of his speech came from, the I Have a Dream repetition. That was not written in his speech before he came to the Washington Monument. Okay, so 3 takeaways from this is that you have to be flexible. So a lot of times, things don't run smoothly in your presentation, so you have to be flexible and adapt quickly. Next, you have to gauge your audience. If your audience is not interested, you might have to add a few jokes, say a few extra lines so that your audience gets more entertained and you're getting your message and intent across. Lastly, you can't do those other 2 bullet points if you don't have a true passion for what you're speaking about. Your intent can't really come across if you have no passion or you don't really care what you're presenting to the audience. So now, presentation. Tips for your presentation. First, you need to check the rubric and your outline that you created for yourself often. If you don't check this often, you're going to miss out on points, or your intent is going to be lost the further you go throughout your presentation. Next, you need to decide milestones and set dates for team check-ins. This also allows teammate accountability. And we did probably once a week, we would have this done by this date, and then it kept us accountable and made sure that we were all staying up to the intent. And then make sure your activities match your target. So if you have a goal of teaching intent to your audience, your activities need to reflect that. Okay. So now we're going to do a group activity. We're going to continue on the gear sheet if you started that last round, and if you haven't, you're going to pick that up. So this, we're going to focus mainly on the 3rd question. So if you haven't done the first 2 questions, that's kind of a take-home, and you can work on that for your presentation. So you're going to focus on how much control do you want within your presentation. Do you want it to be more of a tell situation, where you're up here and we're just presenting to you, the audience doesn't have much interaction, or do you want it to be sell, where you're a facilitator and there's a lot more interaction? And then also, your activities match the type of presentation that you're going for. And you'll have 3 minutes to work within your groups.
Does anybody have any questions?
We're just working on the gear sheet page.
Yeah,
we
so
haven't moved on to the other one, right?
Yeah, so on the
Okay.
third one, so think about, do your activities, right? Do they match